Yo, what up, y'all? It's your boy, Fro Thizzle. And today I'm going to be talking about 28 Days Later, directed by Danny Boyle, starring Cillian Murphy, Naomi Harris, and Brendan Gleeson. So ain't nothing to it but to do it. We start the film off with two animal activists who storm a laboratory to rescue a group of captured gorillas. The researcher is adamant, don't open the cage, the chimps are infected. What do the activists do? They open them up, and the gorillas start pouncing on them and tearing them to pieces. And that's the start of the rage virus. We're following Jim, played by Cillian Murphy, who wakes up from a coma and finds that the UK has been completely evacuated and it's a completely different world. While Jim is walking around near the intro in complete isolation, things are extremely confusing for him, hasn't kicked in his head yet. He pops up at a church, and this is the first infected encounter that he has. We see hundreds of dead bodies displayed all over. And fun fact, college students were actually used for the bodies. They just wanted to be in the movie that bad. Really cool of extra use. But the priest starts to charge Jim. He's infected. Jim smacks him across the face. He runs out of the church, and we have a rather eerie chase sequence. Jim eventually gets rescued by two people, a lady named Selena, played by Naomi Harris, who has a very stone cold exterior, and a guy named Mark, as they're both running away from the infected, as we come to find out. We have a scene where the three show up to Jim's parents' house, and we come to find out that they both committed suicide. They left a very sad note for Jim that's pretty much saying, don't wake up, we're going to sleep, which we'll meet you on the other side. And I thought it was very sad, a really sorrowful moment that did hit me in the feels a bit. The infected neighbors bust through the door after Jim is going through this hallucination with his parents as is trying to kick into his head that they're actually gone. They jump on Jim. He doesn't get bit, but the other guy, Mark, does on his arm. And what does Selena do? In literally a heartbeat, she chops his ass up with the machete in the corner. And it's very cold, but I can understand why she did it. There's a running line between Selena and Jim where she's pretty much saying, I will kill you in a heartbeat if you do turn into one of these things. And that comes into play later on near the finale. Jim and Selena eventually reach a guy named Frank and his daughter Hannah, played by Brendan Gleeson and Megan Burns. And I honestly think Frank steals the show for me. He's my personal favorite character in the whole film. He's a very protective dad who's capable of building traps to keep the infected out. And he also showcases things like collecting buckets of rainwater for survival. Out of a very moody, dark, and bleak film, I'll say Frank is having the most fun out of any character, despite how dire the situation is. I like the scene where they're in the dark tunnel and Frank is driving his taxi across all the other cars, which I thought was a little bit stupid, but I can see if that's the only way they have to go out. And they have to, Hannah has to change the jack of the tire in a split second before the infected in the tunnel start running over to them. And I found this one to be intense, but I also liked how much fun it looked like Frank was having, despite how scary the overall shit is. So Frank is my favorite character. Frank pulls out a radio and shows Jim and Selena that there's been a broadcast saying that there's a soldier base not too far from them, a couple miles northeast, if I remember. And Frank is saying that it's a repeated recording. Nobody in the group is sure if they're going to be able to make it this far to the soldier base. And if the soldiers are dead, they have no idea. But Hannah makes a good point and says, we're going to die if we stay here. So we might as well move. They eventually reach the soldier base. They haven't met the soldiers yet, but Jim discovers a dead baby and her mother wrapped around it, which I thought was a really creepy image that did impact me a bit. And Jim is forced to kill this infected little boy with a baseball bat. You don't see him really hitting him on screen, but I still thought it was a very effective moment. After Frank starts to get upset, there is a very dumb moment, in my opinion, that almost takes me out of the movie. And that's when Frank, who's a little bit ditzy, he's looking at this crow that's pecking on a dead body on the top of a fence. And what does a droplet of blood do? It drops from the crow or the body and goes into Frank's eye, transforming him into an infected. And in my opinion, I don't like this moment at all. Not only because I love Frank, but I felt that it was a bit lazy. In my opinion, I think Frank could have had a way cooler death. And I know this movie is trying to go more so on a realistic sense. So it's more bleak. Characters are killed off without any hesitation. I understand that, but at the end of the day, I felt Frank deserved better. The soldiers reveal themselves to our group, and we're introduced to our main antagonist, Major West, played by Christopher Eccleston. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. But I think Christopher and the soldiers do a really good job at playing scumbags, because eventually we come to find out that they want to rape and impregnate Selena to start off a new population. And it's extremely disturbing and very icky. A cat and mouse game ensues a bit near the finale when Jim is trying to outrun all the other soldiers outside that are trying to kill him. We have one or two cool moments where Jim is fighting back against them, and he even manages to gouge out the eyes of the main icky rapist that's trying to get at Selena, so he does fuck him up pretty bad. And that is one of my favorite moments in the movie. But I did feel that the death of Major West was very underwhelming as well. I do like that Maynard, the zombie that they keep chained outside in the back, I do like that Maynard is the one that kills him, but I felt that a true piece of crap like West deserved a more gruesome, brutal, bloody death. Selena gives some pills to Hannah so she can check out mentally and not see what's happening with the soldiers who are trying to advance and rape Selena. So she wants Hannah to be completely checked out, which she is in the finale when Jim is fighting back against the soldiers. Hannah's just wandering around, la, 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 la. We do have a pretty cool, creepy moment where Hannah's hiding behind a mirror, and one of the soldiers who's infected comes in. He's looking at himself in the mirror. And I do like the shot how Danny Boyle just moves from him to her hiding behind the mirror. And it was a really nice, tense moment for me. Our three, Jim, Selena, and Hannah, do manage to escape after West and the other soldiers get killed by the infected who storm through the base. And they're about to crash through the gate. We have a close-up on the three. The camera stops, and we cut. Moving on to my personal opinions, I do think 28 Days Later is a very solid flick. In fact, I'd call it a very good film. But there are a couple things that I don't like. There's a couple things that take me out of the film in my experience personally. And one of my biggest gripes and nitpicks is the relationship between Jim and Selena. I honestly feel that the movie would have worked better if they were homies, because there's a couple cheesy lines that I didn't really gel with. Near the beginning, there is a full circle where she tells Jim, oh, do you expect people to just fall in love and fuck? And of course, they fall in love near the end of the movie. So I saw that coming a mile away, even when I was younger watching this. And personally, I feel like the romance and the kisses between the two were very forced and very fast. I can understand there's not many options in the world while it's going down and burning like this, especially with infected running everywhere. But it did feel very, very quick. I felt like maybe it was just a pacing issue to me, but I didn't love them as a couple. I would have much preferred them as two great friends. This one's a little bit childish, I'll admit, but Danny Boyle, why do we need to see Cillian Murphy's meat, his dick, 3 times in the first 2 minutes of his screen time? and in fact, I believe Cillian Murphy's probably nude about 30 or 40% of the film. He's either shirtless or he has his ass out. So this shit's crazy. I'm like, oh, Danny Boyle, what is this decision? Are you trying to be more realistic? Are you doing it just to be gratuitous? Are you trying to please the female audience side? What is it? And as much as I can appreciate and respect Danny Boyle's creative decision to direct this movie digitally, it does come across very 420p. And when you watch it on the bigger screen, the frame rates drop. It's very blurry in certain moments. And I can understand if it's trying to invoke a very paranoid and realistic sense of how the infected are taking over the UK. So I can understand why the camera work is more so camcorder looking, more that aesthetic or visual. But honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of it. I do think it takes me out of the film and jars me a little bit. Again, I can respect the decision, but some of the shots where the infected are scratching or they're getting killed or beaten up, the camera work is too shaky for me a little bit. I'm not the biggest fan of it at parts. And that's probably one of my biggest gripes. I don't love some of the camera work in this film. Again, I can appreciate that Danny Boyle went with this route, but not for me. All right, I'm going to hit you guys with some trivia for this movie before I head out. Now, athletes were cast as the infected because of how important physicality is to them. Danny Boyle felt that since athletes can do things other people can't, they would be interesting when translated into the movements of the infected. The film was shot almost entirely in sequence. Only pickups and a few reshoots were shot out of sequence. The scene where Jim and Selena celebrate with Frank and Hannah was shot on September 11th, 9/11. And when I rewatched that scene recently, it does have a very weird feeling behind the camera, like there is something strange or even sad going on. So I felt that heavily on this rewatch. The hospital in the film is a real day hospital, open only during the week. The trust managers of the hospital hire out the building to filmmakers for weekends, and the productions pay the hospital directly, meaning the money from filming goes directly to the hospital's trust fund. So pretty cool move. Stephen King is a huge fan of this movie and even bought out an entire showing of the film in New York City when it released. The design for the symptoms of rage were based on Ebola, which is communicable in all primates, including humans, transmitted through the blood. Ebola is a fever which leads to a rash, red eyes, and both internal and external bleeding. Indeed, in 28 Days Later, The Aftermath, a graphic novel set between this movie and the sequel 28 weeks later, it is explained that the Ebola virus was being used by the scientists as a carrier for the inhibitor, which mutated into rage. Ewan McGregor was the original choice to play Jim, but he and the director Danny Boyle had a falling out at the time over The Beach, in which McGregor was supposed to play the lead until he was replaced by Leo DiCaprio. And like I said before, this is one of the very first mainstream films to be shot entirely digitally. The shot where Jim sees the dead mother holding onto her dead baby is based on a photograph that Danny Boyle saw of a mass of Kurd bodies after they had been gassed. Danny Boyle intentionally sought out unknown and obscure actors for the majority of the leading roles, as he wanted the film to be discovered and not rely solely on star power. Cillian Murphy, Naomi Harris, Noah Huntley, and Megan Burns were virtually unknown prior to the film production, with Murphy and Huntley having only minor roles in films. Naomi Harris only had done British television, and Megan Burns having only one previous acting credit. The only famous actors to note that were cast were Brendan Gleeson, the father, Frank, and Christopher Eccleston, our main antagonist. Stephen King has also paraphrased one of Selena's lines for his novel, Dr. Sleep, "He needs us more than we need him." Cillian Murphy spends 30% of the film shirtless or nude. I called it. Several endings were filmed, including a few in which Jim is taken to a hospital where he succumbs to his gunshot wound, despite efforts by Selena to revive him. Selena and Hannah leave the hospital together, an open ending that was meant to suggest that they would make it. However, a test audience interpreted this as a sign of certain death for them, so the makers filmed a special epilogue with the more uplifting ending. And I gotta say, I feel like that's the better choice, the final result of the film. Last bit of trivia and then I'm out. Naomi Harris and Danny Boyle developed a backstory to explain Selena's hard-nosed, ruthlessly pragmatic outlook. Apparently, Selena was forced to kill her infected mother and father to save her baby brother, only to discover that her brother was also infected. So that does explain why Selena is very, get the fuck away from me. I will kill you in 2 seconds if I have to. Closing thoughts. As much as I'm not 100% complete in love with this movie, there are a lot of moments and tension and suspense and great acting. The infected look great. There are things that I can really appreciate about this movie. And I don't have a low rating for it, but I just know people who give this movie an 11 out of 10, a 10 out of 10, complete knockout. I'm not one of those people, but I am going to give 28 Days Later an 8 out of 10. And that's it, y'all. It's your boy Fro. What do you think about this movie? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Not your cup of tea? Do you adore this movie? Comment below. Let me know your thoughts. I'm going to catch 28 Years Later tonight, Thursday night. I can't wait. I've been waiting for this movie along with a lot of other people for the past 20 years or so. So this is going to be a fun experience. I really hope I enjoy it. I hope that it exceeds my expectations. The only thing I don't like is that Cillian Murphy is not returning for 28 Years Later. He's going to pop up in the sequel, The Bone Temple, 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, which will not be directed by Danny Boyle. Danny Boyle is directing this one coming out tonight, but Nia DaCosta, who directed Candyman, the remake, which I wasn't a fan of, is directing the sequel, which Cillian Murphy will return in that one. And I think it's an extreme missed opportunity. People are waiting for Danny Boyle and Cillian Murphy, but they're like, nah, we'll just fuck with the fans. Really weird choice. But that's it, y'all. Thank you guys for watching. It's your boy Fro. Subscribe and like and all that jazz. Hit that Patreon in my description box and show some love to your boy Fro. Thank you. Peace, guys. Peace.